Women's Six Nations in a Women's World Cup year. This has been a long time coming. A huge opening game in the Women's Six Nations awaits Ireland against France on Saturday in Belfast. Before we get into that, a reminder that rugby coverage on Indo Sport is brought to you by Energia. For the Women's Six Nations, Energia's Half a Fan campaign is calling on fans to bring their support to the team. With Ireland looking to build on last year's win over New Zealand, there's never been a better time to cheer them on with home games in Belfast on Saturday and in Cork on the 12th of April. Now, former Ireland players Jackie Shiels and Hannah Tyrrell are here to preview the championship. You're both very welcome.
Thank you very much.
Jackie, this Six Nations, just feels different, the build up to this, and not only because of how well Ireland did in the WXV last autumn, but because Ireland have the massive hook of a World Cup to build and prep for this summer.
Yeah, there has to be great excitement around the Irish camp. You know, WXV's the premier top of that went really well for us, beating New Zealand, beating USA, coming second in the tournament, which was fantastic. The squad's obviously building with the involvement of the girls who played in the 7 series coming over full time, which can only add strength and depth to the squad. And you have the Celtic Cup Challenge, so they're getting lots and lots of rugby. That was some of the questions we had in previous years. Were the girls getting enough rugby pre-tournament? And obviously the IRFU have worked on that and they've made sure that they have had games. And we have to be super excited. Like, the fact we're in the World Cup, first and foremost, is the first thing. And obviously with the 2 games, having France and England coming to Ireland, like the 2 big hitters. Yeah, it's just unbelievable excitement around. Like my own club ourselves, we have 150 girls going up to Kingspan on Saturday. We're so excited to get there and watch the girls do really well.
What are you looking forward to in particular, Hannah, about this Six Nations?
I think it's an opportunity to show how far we've come. Obviously the last number of years, England have dominated the Six Nations. And look, I think they'll continue to do so and are clear and by far favourites for this particular tournament. But for Ireland, I suppose it's about bridging the gap and showing that we have some really promising young players coming through. And particularly, obviously, with sevens players committing themselves fully to 15s for the last couple of months, I do think there's an opportunity there to particularly put France under a lot of pressure and try vie for that second place to an extent. But it's just showing that we're still there. We've beaten New Zealand in recent times. We put it up to Canada in WXV1. As Jackie said, we came second in the tournament. So I definitely think we're on a bit of a bounce back, and we need to try and, I suppose, keep that momentum going to help us build into what will be a tough World Cup group in the summer.
And Hannah, you obviously know this more than most. Like, Ireland haven't played in a World Cup since 2017. There was a heartbreak of not qualifying in 21. So they go into this year 5 games in the Women's Six Nations, 3 pool games in the World Cup in England from August, and hopefully more in the knockouts. It has there is an opportunity there as well, isn't there, to showcase this game, as you say, and of carrying this unprecedented momentum through this year as well.
Yeah, look, obviously you think back to, 2013 Grand Slam, first ever for the Ireland women's team, and the knock-on effects it had for women's rugby in Ireland. And we went on to win, a Six Nations in 2015 and host a home World Cup. But we've had probably a slight dip in performances over the last number of years, and that's not the standard where we want to be with Irish rugby. And so we've an opportunity here to continue to capture the audiences and get more people in watching games and get younger girls wanting to play the game and growing it from a grassroots and development point of view, which will then give us a stronghold for the next 10 years or so. And this squad has a number of young players who've come through grassroots and the under-20s and under-18 setups the last couple of years. We need to build on that momentum that Scott and the crew have got and just keep pushing forward and hoping for really good performances.
What about that, Jackie?
Yeah, obviously what Hannah's saying there, I totally agree with. The development of rugby in Ireland has to be at the forefront of what we're thinking about. And I do think Ireland, in previous years, we probably would have been focusing on beating Scotland, beating Wales, beating Italy. But I do agree with Hannah, like there has to be kind of a quiet confidence in the camp that we can definitely put up to France. Like, France haven't been playing the rugby that they have of the past couple of years. They had a poor enough WXVs themselves, finishing 5th in that tournament. They have a couple of big players out. Their captain is out injured, and they haven't picked Hermé. So it'll be interesting. Like, most people on the outside would expect France to come to Ireland on Saturday and win that game. But I think there's a quiet confidence in the Irish camp after the WXVs, and plus with the players, the caliber that we have. There's the depth in the squad is unbelievable. You look there. You look at the squad, it's really, really impressive. And that's without Sam Monaghan, the captain, who's injured. You look at the team that was announced today, like Adele McMahon's on the bench. That's last year's captain. So clearly the competition for places, is huge. And that competition for places can only improve the players on the pitch.
Yeah, Jackie, we'll get onto the team in a moment, but let's just go back briefly before we look forward. So Ireland finished third in last year's Six Nations, which qualified them for the World Cup, obviously. The third, obviously, as well, got them into the top tier of the WXV. So they jumped from tier 3 to tier 1. There were concerns back then, if you can remember, after that win over Scotland, over how Ireland would handle being in the top tier. Was this too much too soon? Well, they made an absolute fool of those concerns anyway. They had that brilliant performance in the win over Australia last September at Ravenhill. Then they went to Canada for the WXV1, beat New Zealand, lost to Canada, and beat USA to finish a super second in the table. Jackie, there obviously are a number of factors here, but primarily, what do you put down this incredible transformation of the team down to?
I suppose there's lots of factors. There has to be. I'm obviously involved in grassroots rugby, and you would hope that grassroots rugby is playing a part in that. We have to call a spade a spade. A number of the girls who were involved in the sevens programme did transfer back over to the 15s game. And as Hannah pointed out, they committed fully to that. And that's something that I suppose all we've ever been asking for is either commit fully, or it's that dipping in, dipping out that was causing the problems for years. Those girls who played sevens rugby, they're obviously excellent rugby players. They proved that on the sevens circuit, qualifying for Olympics, etc. But it's a slightly different game, the 15s game, and those players getting more time at 15s through the Celtic Cup, through those games, WXVs, has meant that we're a stronger 15s country at the moment. And I think it is down to obviously the pathways, as well, as Hannah pointed out. I'm involved in club rugby, but there's under 18 national teams now. There's under 20 national teams. There's players coming through that pathways. There's provincial games at underage. And these are things that I suppose the players of the past have been crying out for. And it's only proven now that with those structures in place that our 15s game has grown and can only continue to grow. You look at the talent coming through there. You've got Alma there, who was involved under 18s last year. Suddenly now she's playing for the Clover, or the Wolfhounds in the Celtic Cup, and now she's on the training squad. Will she get a game? We don't know, but obviously her rugby knowledge and her rugby development can only improve once she's in a camp. You obviously have the girls that have chosen not to play in the AIL or with the Celtic Cup and gone off to further their development in the PWR. It's a huge league over there. You've got Dorothy Ward, who left Blackrock to go over and play for Exeter. Adele McMahon's over there, Niamh Jones over there. So again, the exposure to the quality of rugby they're getting can only benefit when they come back to camp in Ireland. So it's just about the volume of players we have playing the game, the standard that they're playing at. All of these things kind of coming together has put us where we want to be, which is, I think I agree with Hannah again, England are slightly one step above everybody else needs to be at the moment. But I am really excited about Saturday. I do think we can have a good old crack at France, especially considering the results over the last couple of years. Like, I don't see it being the landslide that France are used to. I think it'll be a really good game, and I'm confident that Ireland can put it up to them.
Yeah, Hannah, what about the impact of the sevens players? Obviously, Amy Lee Costigan, we'll get on to her in a moment. She was obviously named captain for this weekend's game earlier today. Stacey Flood has been magnificent. I mean, Erin King, we could do a whole bloody podcast on her alone. She's been so magnificent since she joined the 15 setup. Hannah, do you remember what it was like? Because definitely, that sevens, 15s, what was it like back in your time when, the sevens were kind of reefed out, put in, back into the squad? What was that like in terms of the connection that we now see within this Irish squad?
I suppose it was slightly different for me, because back then, while sevens were centrally contracted, being an Olympic sport, whereas 15s were completely amateur. And so, sevens were training full time or, semi-professionally, and had really good camaraderie amongst the sevens. And then you were kind of dipping in and out of 15s camps, which were on at the weekend. And girls were under an awful lot of pressure to be coming up to Dublin every weekend from their jobs from all around Ireland. And I suppose now the big difference for the sevens girls coming into the 15 setup is that everybody is on a contract. And so I think that's probably made it a little bit more seamless in that transition. And it's allowed those sevens girls to, for the last probably six months or so, to almost fully incorporate themselves into 15s. And I think that's going to be a big factor in how we performed this season. Like as Jackie said, it's really, really important. 15s is a different game to sevens. You know, you could be a really good sevens player and a mediocre 15s player. You could be an amazing 15s player, and it just doesn't translate to you for sevens. So it's about kind of getting that balance right. But what these sevens girls definitely will bring is massive, massive amounts of experience, purely because they've been involved in the world stage of sevens, the highest stage of Olympics, the World Series for the last number of years, particularly the leadership of someone like Amy Lee Costigan, Stacey Flood, who've been around a very, very long time. Their knowledge of the game also is immense, but even just the way they hold themselves and how accountable they are, and how that kind of will creep in then to some of the younger players, maybe who are only in their first couple of campaigns of international rugby. But look, they're very, very skillful players, and you know, to bring them in, they've obviously had to compete and try and get a jersey against some very capable players who don't play sevens. And I think it's really good to have a mix of these sevens and 15s players all as one. And yeah, I like Jackie you know, I wouldn't be fully confident of the French. You know, they have their dips in form at time. Think back to 2015 when Ireland were massive, massive underdogs against France, and we pulled out the win in Donnybrook. The French don't like to travel too well at times, so I'd be really hoping for a really good Irish performance, and if not the win, at least showing that we have made huge strides in our game the last year or two, and to you know, kind of put the fear into some other teams of what might be coming down the tracks.
Yeah, and they haven't played in Belfast either, and Belfast really has been a happy hunting ground for this Irish women's squad. Hannah, just to set up kind of the layout of the Women's Six Nations, because it really is a tough schedule. So France and Belfast this Saturday. The following weekend, they're in Parma to play Italy on Sunday, March 30th. It's then a week off, and then it is 3 back-to-back games. England and Cork on Saturday, April 12th. Wales and Rodney Parade on Sunday, April 20th. And then there's a 6-day turnaround. And they've got that showdown that always seems to happen at the end of every Six Nations with Scotland in Edinburgh on Saturday, April 26th. It is a tough schedule, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And this year in particular, as you said, our 2 home games. You love to have home games for the support and to get crowds around you. And our 2 home games are going to be the toughest games we have this year in England and in France. And it also means that games that you would normally target to try and get a win with Scotland, Italy and Wales are now made that slightly bit harder because you are away, you know, and you're going into enemy territory, so to speak. But yeah, it's going to test our whole squad, our depth, particularly with those kind of back-to-back games towards the end of the tournament. You know, thankfully we'll be able to welcome back in the likes of Bevan Parsons, who's been injured. We have some incredible depth. I know Jackie mentioned Tricky obviously on the bench, but Dervla Nicovard wasn't named in the 23 today either, who I would have thought was maybe a shoe-in coming back from injury. I don't know, does she have a niggle or just wasn't unavailable or wasn't picked? But some of the competition for players and places we have right now is insane. Like young Katie Corrigan was a superstar breakout player last year, and she's not in the 23 this year. So it's brilliant to have that competition, and we're going to need, you know, more than the 23 players that are named for this weekend. But as a player, you got to look at just round one, focus on France, get that out of the way, and then you start building towards the other teams and hopefully gain some momentum along the way.
Yeah, so Jackie, what about that team? So as we said, Amy Lee Costigan named as the Ireland captain for this opening game. It will be her first time to captain Ireland in a test match. She has captained Ireland in the sevens. And in case you don't know listening, Amy Lee got married last November, or Lee as she likes to be known. So she took on her husband's Neil's name and she dropped Murphy Crowe. I was talking to her last week, so she was kind of thinking Amy Lee Murphy Crowe Costigan, but she thought that might be a bit of a mouthful, so she's just going to go with Costigan. So what you make of that selection, Jackie? She is one of the longest serving players in the women's programme. She's been an absolute phenomenon in the sevens game. This will be her first time in a Six Nations for the whole 5-game Six Nations, because she was back there a few years ago, but when it was a 3-game tournament because of the COVID. But what do you think of that selection of her as captain for the day?
Look, I'll be honest, it was a bit of a surprise when I saw the team sheet today to see her named as captain, not just because of, I suppose, her relative inexperience at the 15s because of her commitment to sevens, but I suppose from a playmaking point of view, it's rare to see her captain on the wing, I suppose. But Scott Beeman has clearly got full confidence in her. The players have full confidence in her. We can't question his decision making over the last 12 to 18 months because he seems to have got things pretty spot on. He's obviously made a wise choice having Niamh Jones there as his vice captain in the scrum. But look, I think probably comments that Hannah said, like her experience, her professionalism, her mannerisms off the pitch. I don't know her massively well. I've only met her a few times, and whenever I've met her, I thought she was an absolute lady and clearly very professional. So all of those attributes that she has off the pitch transfer onto the pitch, and she's an unbelievable try scorer. You know, she can step out of a paper bag and make space when there's no space available. So from a rugby point of view, you know, I have no questions about her ability on the pitch. It could come down to some things. There's a little bit of experience on when to kick for touch, when to go, you know, for scrums. But there's enough heads around that pitch that can guide her. And like that, I'm sure she's not the kind of player that won't listen to people. So I think, you know, it was probably a surprise for a few people, myself included. But I'm sure, you know, she's got the backing of the management. She's got the backing of the players. She's an excellent rugby player. And as long as it doesn't impact her doing what she does on a day-to-day basis on the pitch, I'm all for it. So, yeah. As long as, you know, at the end of the day, this is an international team. The 23 that were named, or 22 or 15 that are named, all of them have experiences and qualities that can lead the team. So it's about, as a collective, as long as they back the decision of their captain making the right decisions on the pitch, they'll be fine.
Yeah, and Enya Breen, who captained Ireland towards the end of the WXV, she's on the bench for this weekend's game. Hannah, what do you make of the 6-2 split? So no Nicole Fowley, she's not in the squad. She started against France, obviously, last year, and, you know, I thought her kicking game was really impressive in that game. What do you make of the decision to go with 6-2? Dan O'Brien obviously starting. I suppose they do have the comforts. Stacey Flood is in there at full back as well. She recovered from an injury that she picked up last month. But what do you make of that selection?
Yeah, very surprising. You don't often see it in the women's game, but
Scott
was obviously trying to do something different and play with some of the players he has around him. So I suppose, like, for me, what probably stuck out outside of Lee being captain, you know, look, she's a phenomenal player and well able to play at any level and has the respect of probably both teammates and opposition, and so that will definitely stand to her. I think with Stacey Flood at 15, that obviously eases the need for a 10 on the bench in Scott's mind. But also you look at Enya Breen, who has played 10 in centre there. So he's looking for players who can play more than one position. With Bevan Parsons out, it gave Anna McCann a chance on the wing. And Anna McCann has played a variety of positions. Most notably has been recently centre. I was a little bit surprised to see her named on the wing, but centre is fairly stacked at the minute with Eve and Aoife there. But Anna can also play back row if it came to it, a push. So there is an awful lot of kind of movement in and around there that you can have. But it doesn't surprise me that he's gone for that 6-2 split with the players that he has in that back line and how he can shift players around a little bit. Like, if it came to it, Eve could play 15, you know, Stacey can move to centre, Stacey can move to 10, and you can come off and play 10 or centre as well. So there are all these kind of shifts and permutations if needed. And Scott obviously feels like the French are bringing a big pack, and their front row is quite big and quite aggressive, that he might need some extra forwards to give us a big push and try to get us over the line.
Yeah, and Jackie, just in the forwards then, you know, first championship start for Ruth Campbell. She's in there ahead of Fiona Chute, who drops to the bench. The Irish back row, oh my goodness. It is just incredible. Erin King will also make her championship debut at open side flanker. Brittany Hogan at blindside, and Aoife Wafer at number 8. Honestly, I'm nearly drooling here at the thoughts of that back row playing on Saturday.
Yeah, look, it's a hugely exciting back row that Ireland do have. And again, we talk about the bench, you know, the 6-2 split. I suppose, as Hannah pointed out, France have a big pack themselves. They come with ferocity and big players. So Ireland will need to look into that bench, but the calibre of players they have starting. So, like, Aoife has been phenomenal. I suppose the only thing now is she's no longer a bit of an unknown quantity. A lot of teams will have her pegged and looking at her early on, but she's a very, very talented player, and I'm sure she can manage that. Erin King, again, off the 7 circuit, she's explosive, she's quick, she's dynamic. So all those attributes she'll have will be brilliant as well. And then you've got Brittany as well. So, like, the back row will be impressive, but the French back row is impressive too. I don't know what caliber player they have, but the fact that they can drop Hermé from the squad, their captain of last year, to bring in some new players to trial, just kind of, it's a little bit fearful of what they have coming as well. But, you know, the depth that Ireland have and the versatility that Hannah points out that Ireland have, I think, you know, it's just super exciting to see what we're capable of and the opportunities that they're out there for the players.
Yeah, and they can do it any which way, can't they? Like, they have that power game. They obviously have their tremendous backs, Jackie, as well. So what kind of game plan do you expect Ireland to deploy? You know, more of a kicking game. Obviously, we saw Nicole Fowley start against France in Le Mans last year. Eve Higgins said during the week that the worst thing we can do is fall into that trap of playing like France. We want to play to our strengths, and I think the variety of our kicking game has really come on, and we see that as a strength.
Yeah, I think anyone that's watched Ireland play over the last couple of matches will know that Scott Beeman's plan is to play in their half, okay, and get the ball into there and let them make mistakes. I suppose the only downside of that is that's probably a way that France like to play. France are very happy to get the ball in open play, and they have a back three that can move the ball. Just like their men, they're all about jouer and playing some rugby. So Dana is a very, very good kicker. And Emily Lane there at scrum half is a good box kicker as well. So it's just about making sure that when we are kicking, we're kicking to... If we are chasing, that the line is there and that we chase well and we pin them back. And if we're kicking for placement, then we get off the pitch and we get our setup there. You just can't kick loose to France in any shape or form, because they have players who will try things from anywhere. But I don't think we'll go away from what we're comfortable with, which is basically putting them under pressure, playing it down in their half as much as we can, and going from there. But like that, I'm sure Scott's aware that teams are watching what they're doing. So I'm sure they have a plan B. I'm sure they have a plan C. You know, we talked with the caliber of player we have there. You know, Aoife Wafer's a ball player. Brittany Hogan's a ball player. Dorothy Wall at second row can play ball. You know, you have Niamh Jones there in the hook, and she's well able to get on the ball. And then, as we talked about the back line, I'm sure Amy Lee Murphy-Crowe or Amy Lee Costigan doesn't want to be chasing ball all day long. She wants ball in hand. So, look, I don't think we will play too far away from what we're used to, which is playing the ball in the right areas. But when we have ball in hand, we have girls that can do a lot of damage. You know, you talk about Eve Higgins there, like she can make great decision making from 12, great footwork. You know, Aoife Dalton as well. She's a fantastic rugby player. She's shown that over the last couple of seasons since she came in. So I hope we don't just turn into a kicking team. I hope that when we have opportunities, we play ball, because we have excellent players on the pitch who can definitely use it. Yeah,
and of course Dalton scored against France last year, as did Wafer. What about that, Hannah? What do you feel is the best game plan for this weekend?
It's very hard to tell, particularly when you haven't seen France play in a couple of months and you don't really know what they're coming out with. But I do think, particularly in the first 15-20 minutes, we're going to be trying to size France up, and it will be kicking for territory, seeing how good they are reacting to that ball. The weather conditions aren't supposed to be great at the weekend, so can they deal with the high ball under a bit of wet weather, stuff like that? Big focus, I would imagine, for Scott, and has been over the last year, has been their defence. You know, you look at that back line, we've picked physical specimens, but who are well capable of putting in big hits in that back line. You know, and there's nobody there just kind of filling in the numbers and someone having to make up for them. And I think Anna McGann, 14 there as well, big physical winger who will be able to stop them fairly quickly. So I think we will see a kicking game in the first 15 minutes, but it wouldn't surprise me if Scott has a few tricks up his sleeve on maybe a couple of line-out throws when we are in attack, just to try and catch France off guard. But defensively, I think they'll have put, you know, really worked on their contact, their double hits, you know, forcing France backward, and then really just getting their discipline right and their kind of pillar and stuff like that. Because with Bourdon Sansus at 9, tricky little 9 to deal with, kind of Dupont-esque in how she likes to play around the rucks a little bit. I imagine Ireland will plan to be really solid there and try and get some big turnovers at the breakdown and make it a little bit messy for France and try play off ball that way.
Yeah, so she obviously scored after 2 minutes, Sansus, in Le Mans last year. So last year they beat Ireland 38-17, Hannah, but that 21-point margin was the lowest margin of defeat for Ireland since Ireland last beat France in 2017. So what opportunity awaits here for Ireland?
Look, the possibilities are endless. The main opportunity and objective is a win, and I don't think that's out of grasp or out of reach for this Irish team. You know, as I said, we're on a high. Have we fully breached that gap? No, I don't think so. And I do think, you know, maybe 8 times out of 10, France will be a better team than us on the day. But I do think there are opportunities within that French team. They aren't as settled as they've usually been. Results didn't really go their way in WXV1, as Jackie said. They don't always turn up on big occasions, you know, and sometimes you can catch them cold a little bit at the start of a tournament. And I think, and I hope Ireland are ready for what France can bring and kind of catch them off guard a little bit and try and sneak a win. Outside of that, I think what we'd be looking for is a really good performance. You know, as I said, a really tight-knit defence. And if France do score, that we make them work very, very hard for any scores. We don't give them any easy opportunities or points. And that we create opportunities and attack ourselves, even if we don't execute at the final hurdle. That if we're creating opportunities and putting France under pressure, I think that's a good performance in itself. But I do think there is a win there. Like, you know, I do think Ireland could go out and do a number on France.
Yeah.
That being said, France are good enough to go out there, and if we don't perform, they could put 40 or 50 points on us. And so it needs to be, you know, good attitude and good performance backing that up.
Okay, before I get your predictions, Jackie, I might just briefly ask you about the other nations, obviously. England, you know, they'll just probably continue to monopolise this championship. But what other nation in particular do you think might make progress this year? I mean, Wales, they were an absolute mess last year. We know about that, but they've got a new head coach now. They've got their Gloucester Harpery players, you know, having just won the Premiership. What other nation do you think could make a move this season?
I don't know if there's been much movement happening. I still predict that it'll be Wales with a wooden spoon, but I do think they will make progress from last year. I think Sean Lynn is a fantastic coach. You can see all over social media the love that the Gloucester Harpery players had from, you know, the environment that he built there. I think he's only after going into Wales just this week full time, so it's very difficult to make big changes in that period. I'm sure he's been part in, part out with Gloucester Hartby and Wales over the last couple of months. But I do see them improving. I just don't know if the improvements will be big enough to make a significant dent on the championship. Their game that they'll normally target will be Scotland, and that's the first game they have. And quite a few of their players played last weekend in the PWR final against Saracens. So I'm not sure. I see they've been put back into the squad straight away, whereas England have the luxury of resting predominantly any player that played for Gloucester Hartby and Saracens against Italy. So, you know, it's a quick turnaround for them. It's a big game, and that's the one that they target. But I do see Scotland winning that one, especially it being away from home for Wales. But I'm hopeful that Wales will improve. Italy, again, I still think they'll finish second from bottom. You know, they've had they haven't really hit the highs that they hit in 2015 or 2016, but I think they're struggling a little bit as well. Scotland, I'm interested in because they brought in 9 new players. And you can see from the Celtic Cup, they really use the Celtic Cup to blood young, developing players. They've used it a slightly different way than Ireland have used it. So I'd hope for Scotland that doesn't backfire on them. I hope those players can perform and they can finish, I suppose, fourth behind the England, Ireland, hopefully in second, and France. But yeah, Scotland will be interesting because they're trying to blood new players. He's made the manager's made a very comment that he wants to get players experience for the World Cup. They are looking definitely to build on their squad, and they have a high number of players in PWR. So, you know, they'll be an interesting side. But just going back to the Irish game, I suppose, like the big thing for us against Ireland, against France. France have put 56 and 53 points in Ireland in the last 2 games we played in Ireland. So I know, and I know we're optimistic that Ireland can win. I really am optimistic, but you know, France have won the last 19 out of 22 games against Ireland. So what would be good for Ireland this weekend, as Hannah pointed out, is we have to create chances, but we have to keep that score difference as minimal as possible. You know, all these positives we talked about, the improvements, the full-time contracts, the introduction of sevens players, the Celtic Cup, all these huge positives in Irish rugby, they're only going to matter if the performance is there. And that's not to put extra pressure on the girls. They'll put pressure on themselves. But we are good enough to challenge France. It's just making sure on Saturday then that we do all the basics right. As Hannah said, the defence has to be on. If we're kicking, we're not kicking aimlessly. Because there is huge excitement around this team because we're good. It's not false excitement. It's excitement because there's a really excellent calibre of player there. You talk about Sansu at 9. Our back row, if our back row are on form, like they are going to hopefully make her life a nightmare. Like they can make her day a nightmare. And if we can do that, if we can get our players doing the right things at the right time, like 100% we can have a go with this France team. Okay,
so prediction, Hannah, I'll go to you first. Where will Ireland finish in the table and for this weekend? I know one kind of leads into the other.
I'm going to say third. As optimistic as I am for Ireland, and I obviously hope they can win at the weekend, I think looking at past results and everything else, I'm going to say a France win, probably something around 26-17 at the weekend to France. But I obviously hope I'm wrong, and we do a number on them and keep it tight. But that would be, I would say, a good result for Ireland, even if they lost within a margin of 7 to 10 points.
Jackie?
Yeah, as I said, I'm optimistic. I do think France are under a bit of pressure. France had a very poor WXVs. There are clearly some things going on in their camp. They haven't performed well in the last couple of matches, so they will be coming out with a mission, and they'll know that Ireland are confident. So, like that, I am optimistic. I do think Ireland could get a win here, but I'm with my sensible hat. I'm going to see probably a 3 or 5 point win for France this weekend. And I think if Ireland can finish third in Six Nations, which they should do, that's a pretty good standing for us.
Yeah, it is indeed. Well, Jackie and Hannah, thank you very much for that, and enjoy the game on Saturday.